we're gonna get right to it. We're gonna start out with a welcome by Ken Sharkey, one of our distinguished counselors. So, Mr. Sharkey, if you don't mind, if you come forward, please. Y'all give him a hand.
Thanks, Will. You know, I think, can everybody hear? I'm pretty loud. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay. I'd like to thank the Black Student Union, Student Government, and Pathfinders Group from the Men's Center for sponsoring this event. Thank you very much. Something that Lakeland needs every year, not just this year. So I have notes, but I'll use them. But I just want to talk a little bit about me and my journey to where I'm at today and how I got here. I never ever would have thought I'd be speaking at a Black History Month program because in reality, I didn't turn black till I was 21. I grew up in Twinsburg, and I initially went to University of Toledo, and I had assimilated into the white culture, into the European culture, and was pretty much ashamed to be black. In fact, I remember being, I played basketball at Twinsburg. And just a little bit more about Twinsburg. My graduating class was 178, and it was 13 black folks who graduated. So it was easy to assimilate into that culture because that is what was there. I remember playing at I played basketball at Twinsburg, and I was sitting on the bench resting. I didn't always sit on the bench, just so you know, okay? And we were playing against Warrensville, and I looked over at their cheerleaders, and they were cheering. And does anybody know the difference between how black cheerleaders cheer and how white cheerleaders cheer? Yeah, all the black folks know exactly what I'm talking about, okay? Any white folks know what I'm talking about? Okay, when white folks cheer, it's more of a A, B, yes, we'll win. You know, with black folks, we're like, yeah, we're gonna win tonight. You know, and I looked over, I'm sitting on a bench, this is serious. Looked on the bench, I was totally embarrassed at the black cheerleaders. I was like, oh my God, look at those black people. That's where I was. I remember before, I ended up transferring to Tuskegee. Jumping ahead a little bit, but even before that, in high school, my brother said, my oldest brother, he says, well, why don't you go to Tuskegee for college? And this is what I said, exact words, I'll never forget, with all those black people? So I had no idea about my culture, about my heritage, about my ancestors, and at that point, I really didn't want to know, okay? So I went down to Tuskegee, and it was the most beautiful thing ever, okay? It was the most beautiful thing ever. I got down there, and I saw people majoring in architecture and graduating. I saw people going to vet school. At that time, we had the second best vet school in the nation, not just with black schools, but period. I saw people, some of my friends, a couple of my friends are judges now. So it enabled me to see people that looked like me do really special things. So when I was younger, I didn't see that. My parents were great role models, but outside of my parents, I didn't see a lot of that. So when I went down there, I saw that, and it couldn't help but make me feel better about who I was. Because now I see people that look like me doing really special things, made me feel special. So, tell you this for a number of reasons. One of the reasons being, if we as black folks don't look at ourselves in a positive light, how can we feel good about ourselves as individuals? You know, and this made me proud of my history, my culture, and my ancestors. It made me look at myself in a different light. I was proud to be a black man, something I had never been. And I have been ever since then. But I know growing up, a lot of black men, a lot of black young ladies don't feel that way because we don't see a lot of that positive. Everybody doesn't get a chance to go to Tuskegee or HBCU. Who does not know what HBCU is, by the way? It's a historically black college or university. I played baseball at Toledo, and I got cut like the last cut, right? And it was issues in my head going on. Well, was this fair or not? I went to Tuskegee and I played. If I would have got cut out, I wouldn't have even questioned that because it wouldn't have been an issue. You know, so just giving you a little bit of insight what it's like to be a black man that was previously a white man, or, you know, it's so many different ways. We're all individuals. We all have our journey. We all have our stories. But to see positive people that look like you is so encouraging. I imagine it's just like that for women. You see some positive women, it just pumps you up. It stirs you up to be a better person yourself. I mean, even as Americans, when we look at the Olympics and we see Americans win, we're like, yeah, I'm an American. You know, so we need to really lift each other up. And this is not just a black thing, this is an everybody thing. You know, this is for the world, for the country, for the state, for Lakeland, for yourself. We need to lift each other up because that's the only way we're going to get things done and make things better. A couple of other things I just want to say. What we do a lot is we feel like everything is like a dichotomous type thing. Either if you like this, you have to hate this. If you hate this, you have to like this. We've been seeing it the last couple of years with police and black folks. It doesn't have to be like that. There's so much in the middle to where people can come together and actually get things done. I have a theory. It's not proven, but I think if you get any group, black, white, green, purple, man, woman, probably 2% of that group are idiots, but they get all the attention. Everybody else, we're all doing what we need to do. We're all, you know, trying to live a life that's positive and do some positive things, but it's that 2% that we sometimes let sway us to do things that are not cool, to think things that are not cool. We have to start to think ourselves and step up to the plate and make things different. You see the high school kids doing that in Florida right now with the shooting. High school students everywhere come together. You know, if you look at the civil rights movement, a lot of those were college kids, but they were coming together to make changes. We can make changes, so keep that in mind. I could stay up here talking forever, but I got to tell you this last thing. I was not even going to speak. That man right there, Willie Smith, he made me speak today, and I'm so glad he did because just like I'm telling you, you got to step up and be on the forefront of change. I need to do that same thing. We all need to do it to make changes in a positive light, okay? All right, that's it for me. If I had a mic, I'd drop it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sharkey. That was very insightful and very transparent of you to share some of your experience with us. The next person coming up, I think everybody in this room knows. She's a part of pretty much every club, every positive activity that I've seen since she stepped on this campus. She doesn't know this, but the fact that I'm even on student government is a direct result of my watching her being involved. So at this time, I would like to introduce the president of the first ever that I know of Black Student Union on Lakeland Community College campus. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Ms. Tiffany Renfro.
Thanks, Will. That was so sweet. Okay. So Will wanted me to come here today. It's Black History Month. We did a lot of informational things downstairs. I don't know if anybody's been
in the atrium and they saw a couple tables and different things we've done. Just if you walk down the seal stairs going down, you'll see like big poster boards full of Black history information. So I just wanted to come up here and talk about a couple of facts about people inventors, that stuff people might not know. Just run a couple things off real quick. So the first one I like to talk about is Dr. Shirley Jackson. Does anybody know who she is? Have a clue? Nobody? No one at all? Okay, well, she invented the touchtone telephone, portable fax, caller ID, call waiting, and fiber optic cables. So she like pretty much did the whole thing. Like she did a whole lot. So I thought that was kind of interesting reading about some facts about her. Then I'm gonna skip over to another lady, Marie Van Brittan Brown. It's a mouthful. Has anybody ever heard of her either? Nobody? Okay, well, she was a full-time nurse who invented the first, what did they put on here? Closed circuit television security. So she noticed that there was an issue at her home with security. So she made the first, like, I guess camera type of thing where they will let you know that someone's at your front door and contact the police if need to be. So she was the first one to take that off, and it took off. As you can see now, it's taken off from there drastically. So then we have another person. Some people might know this guy, Otis Boykins. Nobody knows who this guy is? Oh my gosh, we're like going 0 for 0. Okay, so Otis Boykins invented the pacemaker. So his mom died of heart failure. So he invented the pacemaker. Yes, he also did IBM computers, burglar-proof registers, and chemical air filters. So he did a whole lot too. All right, people might know, maybe not. I'm guessing people won't know who this person is because no one knows who anybody else has been. But Charles Drew, you know who Charles Drew is? Do you know what he did?
He was the one that was quite responsible for blood plasma.
Blood plasma, large blood.
He did a lot of other things.
Yes. So he's a major role in the development of large-scale blood banks with blood plasma and the blood mobiles.
Yes.
So he's the one helping with all of that blood transfusion stuff. Okay, we have another one, Elijah McCoy. Know who Elijah McCoy is? No hands? Okay. So back in the day, way back in the day, when they would have trains, and they still use trains now, but when we have trains, they would have to be lubricated in order to keep them still in the tracks. So they would have to stop a lot frequently to lubricate the trains. He invented a lubrication cup for the trains so that they will automatically lubricate themselves. So it's kind of cool, little thing. And then I have a last person, and hopefully people know who this guy is. I'm hoping, fingers crossed. Garrett Morgan. Know who he is? We got a couple of them. I hope we know because it's at least Cleveland. Come on, we got to know this one. So he did the gas mask and the traffic signal. You got that one? Yep. So that's all I really have here. Just a couple little facts for Black history. Toss that out there. But thank you guys. Thanks, Will. This has been fun.
Thank you very much, Tiffany, for those enlightening facts. I thought I knew a little something about Black history, but I think I learned some stuff today. The next person to come forward will be Matt Murray, who's the president of the Pathfinders organization here. And as he comes up, I'll say this. Pathfinders was the first organization that I joined here. I got an email from them before I ever had taken a class. I'm like, what are these guys? Who are they? What do they do? So I came out to the meeting. Now, Matt is going to come up and tell you exactly what they're all about and why they're important. Matt?
How's everybody doing? Well, my name is Matt Murray. I'm here, head of the program coordinator of the Pathfinders program, and basically we're here to inspire African American male students to continue their education in spite of complications and life obstacles that try to stop you from achieving your destiny. Like Will said, Pathfinders emailed me before I even was accepted or even filled out the application of coming to Lakeland, and I'm just like, how did they know about me? It sounds like they had a spiritual call on that they knew I was coming or something like that. But but no, how I started was Jim sent me an email and, hey, you want to come out for this Pathfinders event, and I got the letter. I'm just like, what is Pathfinders, you know? So I attend this meeting, and it was inspirational. I felt as if I belonged here, or as if I was already a part of the Lakeland culture. And I'm pretty sure everybody can attest to this, that Lakeland has a loving culture. You feel like you can be anything you want to be in life, and you can feel like you can achieve that goal. But that's what Pathfinder's done for me. It gave me a lane to be able to receive an education and to be able to mentor other students here at Lakeland as well. We have a couple gentlemen here, part of the Pathfinders program. You guys can stand up, and James is in a chair. He's part of the Pathfinders as well, but he'd like to raise his hand. So let's give him a round of applause. These guys they're here they are committed. They're committed to change, and I see them that I'm really proud of them for stepping out, for attending this meeting. That's one thing I like about them, that they're committed guys, committed to committing change in their community, and they're always willing to work and to stay after late hours to pass out flyers or to do anything for our program. So I thank you guys. Thank you guys. So the civil disobedience, how we Pathfinders became a part of this movement, is that disobedience is a disagreement. It's a manifestation of what you feel like you should get versus the process. It's a way of, like, you don't want to go through a process to get what you want. You kind of want to get there now instead of go through the process. Now we're living in a culture where we have Instagram and Snapchat and all these images that gives us what success looks like, but it doesn't give us the process of what it takes to achieve it. So one of the things that create this disagreement or disobedience is, why can't I have that? Why is it me? You find a lot of people blaming themselves, and that's why they're not committed, because they blame themselves. It's a lot of internal dialogue that goes on that stops them from achieving their destiny. And so one of the goals, particularly the Pathfinders, is to calm down that inside voice, is to get them to relax and to recess and to reconsider your decision before dropping out. I think that commitment is something that our generation is not really take seriously. We give up too soon. Part-time jobs, they call off. They call off more days than they work. And I think that we have to stop living our lives emotionally. Stand when times get hard, and everybody has a story. Everybody has a story that has shed blood, pain, but the point is that you stick it out. College and life is a marriage. You have to stick it out. If you divorce, they serious, death till you part, till death till you depart. Because if you leave life, you're out of here. But so in order to remain obedient to your journey of life, stay committed through the rain, storms, and you'll find your promise. You'll receive it. Okay? All right, thank you for your time.
I'm here to introduce our speaker for today, the Bishop, Reverend Dr. Thomas A. Minor, a.k.a. Tony. A little bit about him. Dr. Tony Minor is the senior pastor of the Community of Faith Assembly Church in Cleveland, Ohio, and serves on the Council of Bishops for Higher Ground Always Abounding Assemblies based out of Columbus, Ohio. Dr. Minor is a graduate of Morehouse College with a BA, a Bachelor's of Art in English. He continued his education at the Interdenominational Theological Center, where he received a Master's of Divinity in Christian Ethics and Public Policy as the Benjamin Elijah Mays Fellowship Scholar. Dr. Minor earned a Doctor of Ministry degree from the United Theological Seminary as a Martin Luther King Scholar under the direction of Dr. Wyatt T. Walker, the former senior pastor of the historic Canaan Baptist Church in Harlem, New York. And Dr. Walker was also the former chief of staff for Dr. Martin Luther King Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Dr. Minor is a strong voice for social justice and is the former aide to Ambassador Andrew Young and Dr. Joseph Lowry, who are also two former associates of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. The New York Times and USA Today cited Dr. Minor for his work in voter empowerment and election protection through the People for the American Way. He has a very diverse background and expertise in managing programs that target low-income individuals in the greater Cleveland area and has held top administrative positions serving in, among other things, public housing, HIV/AIDS awareness, and fatherhood. And he's also the founder of the new program known as Safe Streets, Safe Schools, in which several churches have band together to escort the young people to school and from school in the morning and afternoon in the wake of the Eliana DeFreeze murder that happened last year. Dr. Minor is the former director of advocacy at Lutheran Metropolitan Ministries, which is one of the largest social service agencies in Greater Cleveland. And while there, he became a leader in environmental justice and leading congregations to address health disparities. He currently serves on several boards, including Metro Health Hospital, where he's now employed, the United Way of Greater Cleveland, the Greater Cleveland Urban League, the Cleveland Treatment Center, and Nuva Loves Incorporated, and probably some more that's not on this paper, because he is truly a man of the people. He's married to Natoya Walker, who's a Cleveland native, as well as the Chief of Public Affairs for Mayor Frank Jackson. They have two sons, Scott and Tommy, who's a graduate of Morehouse College, and Scott is one of the starring point guards for Villa St. Joseph High School in Cleveland. But I can tell you a lot about him, but I think he can do a much better job of it. So would you all stand and help me to welcome my pastor and our speaker, Reverend Dr. Bishop Tony Minor.
Thank you very much. I am so happy to be here. But in some ways, I really shouldn't be here. And I really owe it to Debbie Carter. While I was a student at Morehouse, I decided to go to Clark College Library. And while I was there, I saw a young Spelman sister sitting at a table. And so I went up, talked to her, tried to introduce myself to her, et cetera. And she said, I tried to get her phone number, et cetera. And she said, well, come downtown, meet me at this place. She gave me an address, and we can talk. So I went home, took my books back, went to the dorm, went down there. And it turned out to be the campaign office for Andrew Young. And while I was there trying to impress Debbie Carter, I left there with a stack full of flyers. And I was encouraged to go building to building, dorm to dorm, passing out these flyers. Well, it turned out that Andy Young was coming the next day to speak for his campaign. He was running for mayor the first time. And when they came into the room, there was hundreds of students there, right? And from that day on, I became known as the student activist on campus. I ended up with the movement, but I never got Debbie Carter. And she and I became really good friends, stayed active, but that was my pathway into getting into the movement. I really went to Morehouse to be a lawyer. I wanted to go into corporate law, and I really should be somewhere in California driving a Bentley just all into Tony Minor, but I ended up chasing Debbie Carter, and I ended up in the movement. And so that's just a really great story. One of the other things that really impacted me was that as I was a student, and we did a whole lot of campaigns, and I was president of Students Against Apartheid. I was president of Young Dems. And I remember one morning we were at a rally, a prayer breakfast, and Dr. Ralph Abernathy was there. And a few of the students, those of us that are kind of well known, he came up to us and he stood there and he grabbed my hand. Dr. Ralph Abernathy was the best friend of Dr. King and was with him on just about every movement activity that they had. And he grabbed my hand, looked me in the eye, and said, "Young man, do all that you can do to keep Dr. King's dream alive. We need you." And when he said, "We need you," he squeezed my hand. And you know, it was one of those powerful moments that sort of change your life. And just being a student at the house, as we say, is a place where you are encouraged to be successful, but you're also encouraged to have great concern for those who are oppressed, who are downtrodden, and need someone to help them find their voice. And that's something that was embedded in all of us when we left Morehouse, and I believe is something that I have really continued to do. We're talking about a very important subject, civil disobedience. And not just the civil rights movement, but civil disobedience as a tool for social change. I want to read a couple quotes about Dr. King. And he says, "An individual who breaks a law that conscience tells him is unjust and who willingly accepts the penalty of imprisonment in order to arouse the conscience of the community over its injustice is in reality expressing the highest respect for the law." He also said that we who engage in nonviolent direct action are not the creators of tension. We merely bring to the surface the hidden tension that is already alive. And finally, an important quote here, he says, "I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in the stride toward freedom is not the KKK, but it is the moderate who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice." That in so many ways speaks to this whole question of civil disobedience. It's defined in some ways as the unwillingness to comply with certain laws as a means of peaceful protest, a means of activism, I add, and social justice used also, I'm speaking of civil disobedience, to draw attention to an injustice or to pressure for social change. So in many ways, it is a tool. This concept is made famous by Henry Thoreau, Gandhi, and King. What is equally important is it was Thoreau who first coined this term. He is considered the father of civil obedience because he refused to pay the poll tax. And he did it out of conscience. He did it because he didn't want his dollars to be used to fund and fuel the Mexican-American War, which was really designed to expand the territory, to expand slavery. And it was Thoreau that laid the spiritual foundation, that laid the foundation of conscience, that encouraged people to act out on their conscience and on their belief despite the results. It was King who went on to say that we have a responsibility to disobey unjust laws. And I must also add about Thoreau was that he was not a proponent of electoral politics, of voting. He really felt, and he said in his writings and speeches, that voting is really a game. That it's not until the people organize and take constructive steps that change will come about. And he felt in some ways that people who were put in office are easily bought off. And once they get in office, that they are not as compelled to follow the voice of conscience and to be there on behalf of those that sent them there. For King, he was inspired by Thoreau and Gandhi to shape his philosophy of nonviolent social change with civil disobedience as the centerpiece of his social ethic. For King, it was a moral and spiritual grounding. It was a science for social action, disciplined social action. For King and Thoreau and Gandhi, it was a matter of acting out on one's conscience. King used it as a tool throughout his movements for social change and social justice to combat segregation and U.S. apartheid. A survey of his movements and his final efforts demonstrates the use of the tool. We see it in Montgomery as a protest tool to resist an unjust law, as we see Rosa Parks breaking the law by refusing to give up her seat. But we further see the tool of civil disobedience as the community resisting by withholding their money as a tool of civil disobedience. We see the community peacefully resisting and showing the unity and discipline necessary to sustain the movement through a powerful use of economics and organizing. If you recall, in this movement, we're talking about 12 months of the people being organized. This was before King being this great charismatic figure. This was street organizing, door to door, people inspired. But the key became that they used, as an act of civil disobedience, they used their dollars to bring about economic change. We also see throughout King's movement, we also see the use of civil disobedience very powerfully in Birmingham. It's a real interesting story because if there are three figures that you can tie this to. Jimmy Lee Jackson, James Reed, and Viola Liuzzo. One of the people, it's very interesting because when I was telling you the story of Debbie Carter, that when I went to Andy Young's office, the person that ran Andy Young's campaign was James Orange. I didn't know who James Orange was. James Orange was the organizer for Dr. King in Marion, Alabama. He was there as an 18-year-old man registering people to vote. He was the one that was thrown in jail. He was thrown in jail, and the folks had organized a prayer vigil in support of James Orange. This is outside of Selma. It was there that the word got out that they were going to take James Orange out of jail and they were going to lynch him. That night, they organized a prayer vigil in support of James Orange. On that occasion, the sheriffs and others who opposed freedom came and attacked the marchers. On that occasion, Jimmy Lee Jackson was shot and killed. As he was shot and killed, they had planned a march. In fact, it was James Bevel who said, we're going to take his body in his casket and actually march to Montgomery. They had the first march. As you know, the first march became Bloody Sunday as they went over the Edmund Pettus Bridge, right? But it is when you tie what happened in Selma to what happened in Birmingham, the most powerful thing about Birmingham was the fact that it was the confrontation. It was the confrontation. It was the willingness to act out, to use one's conscience as a way of bringing about change. Dr. King had actually failed in Albany. They had attempted to bring about a movement of change in Albany, but they failed. When they went to Birmingham, Wyatt T. Walker came up with the project called Project C, which was confrontation, as they went to segregate the lunch counters, as they went to increase hiring, to put pressure by being organized. What is interesting about the story was that after Dr. King went to jail, things had really slowed down. It was the young people. It was the young people who made a decision that they wanted to get in the movement. And if you understand the story, it was the act of civil disobedience by the students because their parents, their pastors, their educators all encouraged them to not get in the movement. It was on May 1st, which became D-Day, that the students, college students, high school students, left the comfort of their schools, marched over to 16th Street Baptist Church, over to Kelly Ingram Park. It is the use of civil disobedience to bring attention to the movement. I said earlier that King failed in Albany. He failed in Albany because they could not bring about the type of attention to expose the evil. In Birmingham, they had Bull Connor, who was crazy enough, angry enough, hateful enough to turn the hoses and the dogs on the children. And it was through that act of civil disobedience. This picture right here appeared on the cover of the New York Times on May 4th, 1968. It was Bull Connor taking the bait. It was the courage of the young people that exposed the evil and brought about the 1963 Civil Rights Act. So as we fast forward, we understand it was King who used the art of disciplined civil disobedience. I want to highlight that disciplined civil disobedience as a tool and as the science of organizing, not simply protesting to be protesting, but is tied to a strategy of change. As I went on to say, as I jumped ahead of myself, as we talked about Selma, that after the first, there were 2 marches, Bloody Sunday, but in between that was a second march. The first march was the march that is known as Bloody Sunday, in which James Orange, Amelia Boyden, and all of them were beaten on the bridge because they peacefully marched. There was a second march. Dr. King came in town, hundreds and thousands of others came, and it was that second march that Dr. King went over the bridge and they stopped and they kneeled and prayed. There were people who were angry at King. Now, you got to understand the environment here, and you have to understand this concept of disciplined civil disobedience. King was not at the first march, but the second march, he knew what had already happened at the first march. They went over the bridge, and he was not willing at that moment to do 2 things: defy the court order. One of the things you learn about this type of organizing is that you must do it with a purpose. And you should not be so out of control that you lose your moral conscience. So Dr. King, on this second march, to the anger of so many people, right? They went over the bridge, but they stopped and they prayed. And then they returned. He was allowing the conscience of the country, who had already observed what happened on Bloody Sunday, to run its course. There was a ruling by the courts that they could proceed with the march, and they went on to have the Selma to Montgomery March and eventually the passage of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. What becomes important is understanding discipline, courage, and the art of organizing. Now, we would have seen it in the Poor People's Campaign. But as you know, Dr. King died. In fact, I say that Dr. King actually died April 4th, 1967, not April 4th, 1968, because it was April 4th, 1967 that Dr. King spoke out publicly against the Vietnam War. Riverside Cathedral, downtown New York. It was okay to deal with racism in the South. But now when you begin to deal with economics and world politics, it put King in a peculiar place. If he had lived to go forward with the Poor People's Campaign, it would have been the largest march and civil rights demonstration for economic justice in this country. He was calling for a Bill of Rights. He was calling for 100,000 people not to just march, but to engage in civil disobedience throughout Washington to bring about change on behalf of all of America's people, especially the poor. 60 million people at that time lived in poverty, poor housing, poor education. He had learned the art of organizing. He had learned the process of civil disobedience. They were ready to go forward. So I'm not sure if King was killed on April 4th, 1968, simply because a few folk were mad at him because of what he did in Selma and in Montgomery or Birmingham. I think because King had mastered the art of civil disobedience and was prepared to rally the people behind him. His call for an economic Bill of Rights. He was asking for $30 billion to restructure the economy of this country. Massive, massive. But King died, and as I said the other day at a speech, it's not so much what died on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel. What is more important is what lived. It's not so important what died on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel, but what's important is what lived. And what lived is the process of organizing. What lived is the process of civil disobedience as a tool for social change. Where do we go from here? Civil disobedience has been used in many movements since King, from the labor movement, the anti-war movements, to our country's protests of apartheid. In this day, and the last 15 to 20 years, with the emergence of the Wall Street movement, Black Lives Matter, and the current struggle for gun control, criminal justice reform, and the fight for affordable health care, there is a need, especially as I try to have conversations with my colleagues in Black Lives Matter. There is a need for the science of organizing and the use of civil disobedience as a tool for social change, reform, and equity. Not just protesting, not just causing disorder, anarchy, but it is protesting with a purpose and an outcome. As we approach these issues, we must face them with more than, as I indicated, just protesting, but with the science of social change, advocacy, resistance, and the courage and the sacrifice that comes with civil disobedience. In a speech following Birmingham, or in the midst of the Birmingham struggle, Dr. King was interviewed and was asked very pointedly, They said, you know, you were a man of order and nonviolence. And your willingness to break laws, how different are you from the Southern segregationists? He said, well, there's a really good difference. Both of us perhaps are operating out of our own moral perspective, out of our own conscience. But here's the difference. The nonviolent civil rights person engaging in civil disobedience is willing to accept the consequences that comes with the disorder. On the other hand, as in the case of many of the murders of folks involved in the civil rights movement, often those perpetrators ran and hid. When you're engaged in civil disobedience, you have to have the courage and the sacrifice to accept the penalty that came with it. As we flash back to Birmingham, those young students, college students, junior high school students, were willing to go to jail and pay the cost for their conscience. And that's what it takes. It takes that kind of committed courage. It takes the science of organizing. And that's something that we celebrate during Black History. Black History, the celebration of Black History is just not merely just our contributions and what we've built and the great scientific minds, but it's also the spirit of those contributions. It's the theories and accomplishments of a people who are willing to sacrifice and to really establish a model that can be replicated even in this day. This month, one of my mentors, academic mentor, Dr. Wyatt T. Walker, who was King's chief strategist for the Birmingham movement, and was the former pastor of the Canaan Baptist Church in Harlem. He's the one that came up with Confrontation C, that really went at the heart and the soul of Bull Connor, using civil disobedience as a tool to bring attention to the evil. He died this month. And I recall in some intimate time with him, he said something like this. He said, I'm afraid that the change we desire today will only come as we organize a national protest to shut down the economic structures in this country. We must use our moral strength to bring about change. This was the sad reality that we or they had come to accept. That the only way change was going to come about was to create a mass movement, not a protest movement, not a charismatic movement, but an organized movement for social change. I think some good is possibly going to come out of what happened in Florida last week, when you see young people beginning to organize, when you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, when you, like the students in Birmingham, were willing to risk it all because they knew that their future was in peril. And I'm just very happy that the things that I talked about on this morning is available for them in Florida, for us all around the world. And I have to say to us that this is a model for us to win because the struggle continues. Thank you and God bless you. I'm available to answer any questions. I sort of cut out kind of like half of it because I wanted to spend some time kind of interacting and sort of asking some questions. You know, I have had a blessed life, you know, stumbling up on Debbie Carter, that's a real statement. And it really put me in the face of people who were active players in the movement, had the opportunity of working in the office of Andrew Young, and I was a student intern. And that all came about because I was willing to volunteer, passing out flyers. It's really a very interesting story. And during that time, I also I finished Morehouse and began to prepare for a life as a pastor. And while I was in graduate school, I had the opportunity to serve as the student pastor for Dr. Joseph Eccles Laurie, who was one of the founders of the Southern Christian Conference with Dr. King, and got to spend intimate time with him. And because I was very active in politics and Young Democrats, you know, I was chosen to serve as the student organizer for Julian Bond when he ran for Congress. And as we did a whole lot of anti-apartheid stuff, I would call up some of the old people, older, well, they were not very much older at that point, but to be part of that. So it gave me an opportunity to have intimate conversations about social justice and social change. And it has created in me a sense of comprehensive outlook. That's why one could be involved in HIV and environmental justice and climate change, because it's all so very important, you know. So if anyone has any questions, I would love to just sort of share my experiences.
Have you ever thought about running for any kind of office?
Yeah, as I thought about it, but always said no. In fact, I actually went last fall as far as actually being on the ballot to run for council in Cleveland. And right at the very last moment, I stepped back because I knew that I could win. But in order to win, I had to raise money. And there were sources to raise money. But I knew that if I got the money from the places I was going to get the money, I was going to owe them my votes. And I just didn't feel inclined, you know, to get involved in that kind of politics. Because when I looked at all of the 8 major issues, from the Q to Tamir Rice, et cetera, most of the people that were going to fund me were on the other side of the issues that I had passion for. And so I felt that I was stronger by being an outsider and having a voice of change that was tied to my conscience. But I believe in public policy, and certainly there's a flip side of that too, because even if I would have gotten in office for 1 term, I still could have done a whole lot in public policy. So I'm in the work of public policy. And so I'm encouraging people to run, just don't run and stay parked. That's the problem. When people get parked in them places, they then begin to get influenced by holding on to their office as opposed to being as effective as you can for 1 term. And then have someone come behind you and also equally be effective.
When he made that speech about the Vietnam War, and the others didn't understand why he was doing it, I don't know if you're allowed to elaborate any more on that.
Well, I mean, it certainly created a sense of controversy, and I believe that the disagreement was more so from an operational perspective, one of focus and one of attention and one of priority. So I don't think that, you know, the Andy Youngs and the Ralph Abernathys and the NAACP Urban League, all of them that were in this pool together, disagreed with King's focus. But I think that the concern was that we had this huge plan in place for the Poor People's Campaign. And in so many ways, they saw going to Memphis as being a distraction, firstly. Secondly, as I recall talking to people like James Bevel and Hosea Williams, those that did the advance work, that one of the things that King ran into with the first march in Memphis was that there was not enough time for them to send organizers in to do the advance work. So the concern was not the issue per se, but it was from an organizational standpoint and feeling that this was taking them off of focus on this big issue. But for King, as he said when he got to Memphis, is that he cannot be concerned about these big issues and not have concern about these poor garbage workers. And he felt that if anything, that supporting them was equally tied or very much so tied to the Poor People's Campaign. And it was there that he actually was killed. But I think even with his death, it certainly leaves us a strong sense of commitment, of heart, of courage, and compassion, even for them that would seem unimportant.
What are your thoughts on the Black Lives Matter movement? Perhaps their strengths, perhaps where they might need to improve?
Well, I mean, I certainly love it. I mean, it's certainly timely. You know, I wish that there was a greater appreciation for the elders that have come along who could give them the science of organizing and share with them, you know. I'm sort of like in between. I'm not an elder, and then I just found out I'm not a peer either. So, you know, so I'm kind of like in the room, but not in the room, you know. But I think that what, you know, if you understand King and how King had to deal with the young radicals of his day, right? Because toward the end of King's life, it was the Black Power movement, the Black Panthers and others whose patience, it's a matter of patience, was not as strong as King's. And as you recall, King in '63 was not as patient as the NAACP and the Urban League. And so I think it is a natural flow of how does the mainstream activists begin to relate and partner with the emergence of new voices. And so just to answer your question again, I just wish that there was a coming together where the science of organizing could be embraced and that sense of focus and the sense of mass organizing. This is what I've always said. See, it's equally important for us to go downtown and protest, but if we can't go back to the communities, see, this is what King did when they dispatched their field organizers into Mississippi and Alabama, right, to organize the people. So it's not a top down. It's coming in, it's building the movement from within. And that's something that I just don't really see. I don't really see the, how do you connect the downtown protests with the protests in the community? Because when you go in the community, because we can go downtown and protest, we can protest officer-involved shootings, but when you go into the community, Miss Jackson is more concerned about Ricky and them, who live on that corner, who's breaking in their house and shooting up their young neighbors. So it's a question of priority, and I think that's an ongoing kind of a both and. I think it has to be a both and. I think we have to be involved with abuse, but I think we also have to deal with what's happening in these areas.
Any more questions?
Not a single question on Trump.
Either they sleepy or you cook your bacon real well. Everybody give Dr. Miner a hand.